Well, what'd you do? Happy Thanksgiving. What'd you do?
What I do, I woke up into church. I sent you a text. We had in-person church in Times Square. Um, so I was there. The church was from 11 till 12:30, and then after church, just walked around Times Square. Had to make a few calls, got some shopping done, and got back home about a little over an hour ago. So that's my day. That's been my day. It's just this is lots to be grateful for.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Sounds like a eventful day.
Yes, it is. Yeah. How was yours? How was your day?
I went to a park on this holy Thanksgiving and had a picnic with my family.
Oh, that's nice. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I had this moment of aha moment last night. The moment was I've been asking the wrong question. I'm like,
Oh,
Dad,
wow.
what was I thinking all along? It's Matthew 1:1. It's like I kept asking the wrong question to begin with. So the question which I should have asked is, what significant? So, if the Gospel of Matthew was written to the Jew, it was primarily intended for a Jewish audience. What's significance of David? Abraham, yes, God made the promise to
Well,
Abraham,
the king comes from David, right?
but we've had kings before David, right? Saul was the first king. It's not like he's. It's not
I
like
know,
he's.
but like in the Jewish Bible,
Yeah.
like to be a descendant of David is the way to know that you're the Messiah. So it's very important to be a descendant of David. Let's be honest. Listen, if he's a son of Joseph, well, if you compare the different genealogies in the New Testament, if anyone wants to say he's the son of God, that's a problem. If you want to say he's the son of Joseph, then that has other problems. You're really supposed to be from the Davidic line, and to kind of get these things worked out.
So you're saying so it sounds like we have three promises. The promise to Abraham was land and son, the land and children or nations. So we have two promises. And I say you have you have promises in addition to that, which form the basis of which again, so you say you have promises you have other promises apart from these two. Is that what you're saying?
The expectation is that the Messiah will come from the Davidic line.
I see. I see. But isn't that the Abrahamic line, right? The Davidic
No, they're
line.
different lines. No, they're not. Not the same line. Abraham is just all the Jews, all the Hebrews and Jews, and everyone comes from Abraham. But the Davidic line is from the line of Judah specifically.
Yeah,
So
and Judah is an offshoot of Abraham, right? It's not
yeah,
like
yeah,
Judah. I mean, so Judah comes like like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and from Jacob is where Judah comes. So I don't. I'm not tracking what's the distinction between the line from Judah and the line from Abraham. It's like saying your great grandfather is his
no,
line is not your.
it's like saying you come from, even if Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain share a great great grandfather, it's
Yeah.
a thing to say I'm from Michael Jordan and Wilt Chamberlain separately. There's a certain thing like all the according to the Bible, all the Ishmaelim also come from Abraham. So those lines are thrown out, and all the whole line of Saul also comes from all these things. But Saul's kingship line is thrown away. If it would have said that Jesus was a son of Saul, that would have been, or a great great grandson of Saul, that would have been a very different conversation.
But that's a fact, right? It's not. I mean, well, I mean, fact. Well, okay, fine. So help me understand this. So is it that did God make some promises to David? Like was David like God? We
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. All over the Bible, there's an expectation. There's a line at Genesis, which is arguably interpreted at the end of Genesis that said the scepter will never leave from David, and that's generally understood rabbinically that you'll never have a line of kings aside from David after Saul. And all that, it's generally assumed that any kings that don't come from David, for example, like the Hasmonean kings, aren't fully legitimate kings.
Okay, so a person had to come from the line of David. Okay, that makes so in light of that, I think that makes sense. So the question about why Moses or why Solomon, that
Yeah,
brings me down.
I feel like if Muhammad is viewed by Muslims as a lawgiver par excellence, and Jesus is viewed by Christians as a person who overrides Moses. So if they wanted to view like Jesus or Muhammad as people who are coming to replace Moses as lawgivers, that would make sense. But really, we're just trying to worry about kingship. Kingship is specifically aligned with David and the house of David.
So at the time when this was written, Christianity was not a religion. Like this book as it is was written for a Jewish audience by a Jew for a Jewish audience, in broadly speaking. So, I mean, so this notion of Christianity which we have now wasn't codified at the time in which this book was written.
Right, but if you're a messianic, you have to come from David. Anyone who claimed to be the king of the Jews that didn't come from David would be thrown out as a joke.
Okay, so it sounds like what Matthew is trying to say in the first verse is that here's your messianic king, like he is from the offspring of Abraham, the offspring of David, and blah blah. Again, so all the
Yes.
promises of Abraham.
So when I look at this, right, so when I look at this gospel, the first thing I see is it's very normal to say these are the generations of someone. It actually does that throughout Genesis. For this is the generations of Abraham, and this is the generations of Isaac and Jacob, and this is the generations of Noah. So this is very much in line with the patterns of Genesis. But when I look at verses 1-2 through 1:11, or even past that, it's definitely, it's more of a Chronicles model where you kind of trace everyone. And the question is, did 1:1 exist by itself and then someone inserted 1:2 until 1:16 to like explain it? Like someone goes, this is the generations of Jesus, the son of David, son of Abraham. And then someone goes, what does that mean?
What does it mean? That's right.
Yeah, and then someone's like, well, we have the book of Ruth, or Ruth, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, the book of Ruth. And in chapter 4, it has this whole long genealogy of David, I think like 4:18 or so. And it goes, this is the family line of Perez, from Chetzron to Ram, Aminadab. And it looks like some of this is cut and pasted from that. And what's interesting about the Ruth genealogy, the Root genealogy, is that some of the names are missing there. There's too many generations that pass of too few people. And it looks like that even also over here, that takes place as well. So it's interesting because looks like they're trying to really try hard. Abraham to Isaac, to Jacob, to Judah. And then it kind of goes, but then it still looks like, because it cuts and pastes the Ruth genealogies, the Ruth genealogies in chapter 4 of Ruth, it still has those issues. Okay, well, here's what I suggest. How about you read 1:2 all the way to 1:6, and let's see what we got.
Okay. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Aminadab, and Aminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David the king.
Okay, so let's stop for a couple seconds. There's a lot of interesting things happen here. So the first, let me make 3 observations. Number 1, all the way up to I guess Perez, that's cut and pasted from Genesis. But then from Perez through David is cut and pasted from Ruth chapter 4. And as I pointed out, a very famous professor named Nachum Sarna always notes that this is actually not all the generations. So it's really interesting that the person who wrote this may not have known that the person who wrote this probably tried so hard saying like, I'm going to trace Jesus all the way back to Abraham. And then all of a sudden, by cutting and pasting Genesis and Ruth, he actually didn't successfully do that, which is just like a funny irony in that.
So if it's that obvious, why did this person not try to correct it?
I don't think it's obvious. So it's really only obvious if you do the math and see how many years. The reason I think it's called telescoping when you eliminate some of the generations. So if we said, for you, the Stefan Raj family goes back 10,000 generations, if you're able to say, actually, just for example, I saw that the Queen of England, there's this thing online that says she's related to Muhammad. Have you ever seen this?
No, I haven't.
So it's really cute. It says she's related to Muhammad, and it shows like it says this person's grandfather was this person's grandfather was that. Because If you know that's your grandfather, you don't need the middle generation. So Ruth did that because Ruth understood like this grandfather. But if you were trying to like just skip generations, you would probably would have said Abraham to Judah because everyone knows Isaac and Jacob. So I would assume that the author of this just cut and pasted those two texts. And that's how he got this, which again, it creates this irony that he tried to accomplish something, but he didn't quite get there.
So okay, so that's one thing. Yeah, he copy pasted. So within the Jewish faith, is it like so versus does it is it the father's line or is it the mother's line?
Oh, famous question. Professor Schiffman versus Professor Cohen show different arguments about the history of Judaism being patriarchal or matriarchal, and the
Yeah,
answer is doesn't matter because right here it's very clearly they're worried about the men, right?
but it also has the women. It
The
also
only
has the
women
women in it.
the only women we have mentioned are the two, again, because it's very clearly cut and pasted, the two that are very clearly cut and pasted that are mentioned in Genesis and in Ruth. Specifically, see Ruth is mentioned and Tamar mentioned because those are the two that the Bible mentioned elsewhere. It's very clear that the person who wrote this probably didn't even know the name of other women in this.
Okay,
So
but does
I
it
would say
matter? So does it matter? Let's say it's copy pasted, right? Does it matter?
no, I think the person who wrote this wanted to give it what's the point of writing a genealogy? Genealogies only impress the people who are already impressed by genealogies. If you say
Mm-hmm,
my great grandfather was special,
mm-hmm,
there's a famous joke that says like I'm related to this person that makes me special, and then the other person says, well, I'm actually the line that my great grandkids are going to say they're related to me, and that
mm-hmm.
makes you so special. It's what you do during your life. So I think like this is only meant to impress people who are very Davidic line oriented. I remember I mentioned to you that in the time of the early Christians in the first century, there's this group called the Marcians who were
Mm-hmm.
very anti-Old Testament. And so they
Mm-hmm.
probably were not as devoted to Davidic line. And even amongst the Gnostics, it's like a 50-50 at best, that most people are not as devoted to Davidic lines unless like, you're a good Jew. Why would you care if you're coming from this line that was, I don't know, 800 years ago, or even if you want to say Zerubbabel and other people from the books of Ezra and Nehemiah are mentioned as Davidic line, it's definitely not something that's easily provable. It's not something that, it's very easy to make up long genealogy lines, as you see here. It's really meant to pander to the crowd. So I would assume the first line was written as like the wow moments, 1-1, and then 1-2 to 1-6 is meant to pander to the crowd. For whoever it proves it to, it proves it to. Okay? So I
Yeah.
have another question. If you look in 1-2, it says Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, and his brethren.
Brothers, yeah.
So I find that very, very interesting because if you look on this whole list, the only three mentions of people who don't kind of matter are the two women, Ruth and Tamar, but then you have the brethren. So the question is, why is the brethren mentioned here as part of a genealogy tree when they're not really part of the genealogy? They're all the other aunts and uncles and nephews that go off in different lines. They're the Ishmael and they're the Isaac. The Ishmael and the Esav. So why do we care about brethren here? So I figure I'll throw this question to you. Why would the author of the Gospel according to St. Matthew write brethren?
Yeah. Well, I would want to think probably because it was through Jacob and through children where the promise of Abraham as a nation was at least it saw the light of day, or that was one way to go forward. And if maybe by saying that, if the author meant to make this as a marker to say through him and his brethren, to say that because he starts with Abraham and David, right? And so if this was meant to say that, if this was meant to imply that here's a signpost, or here is like this group of people, this guy and his brothers, because one cannot deny the fact that this was a landmark event, or this was a landmark, that was a point when, as you said, like as you've mentioned, it has how Israel became a nation, or the Jews became a nation through Jacob, or through the sons of Jacob. Again, it's the first thing which comes to mind, but I don't.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know the answer, but first of all, I misspoke. I see Perez and Zerach are both mentioned, even though the line is only through Perez.
Yeah,
With four mentions. But if I had to take a guess,
but isn't that because, right, Tamar was Judah's daughter-in-law, right? And this goes against the norm because his both his sons passed away, or she married his eldest son and he passed away, and then the youngest son, I forgot what, maybe he passed away too. So Judah, he slept with them with this daughter-in-law, thinking she's a prostitute, and then
uh,
she comes back,
yeah,
right?
yes, that's exactly
Yeah,
right. She pretended to be.
yeah. So could that be the reason why they've listed Judah? I mean Judah and Perez and Zerah by
I think like if I had to take a guess, it
yeah.
would come down to the reason you write the brethren and Zerach and Zerach is because the very goal of 1:2 to 1:6 is to be anti-Marcion, is to root the Jesus as the line and the scion of King David, and so any additional extra biblical famous quotes, I think, were thrown into genealogy. I think to say
I
that
see.
Judah and his brethren, it's meant to imply that that's the group. That's the one we care about. And the fact that we're name dropping Perez and Zerach, I think, from the line of Judah, it's saying like this is the family that we care about. So I think it's just trying to, even though I'm sure
I see. I see.
as opposed to Esav, as opposed to Ishmael, it's really just keeping things. And I think
So
it's a weak answer, I'm saying, because you could think of 100 other people who maybe you could throw into this, but I think it's the right answer in that when you say Judah's brethren, if you just read Judah, you're almost like leaving out such an integral, like, and all the Jewish people, the other 11, 12 tribes are also part of this. So like you're literally creating this large web to throw everyone in. So I think it has to do with that.
so you're saying this is kind of particularity. We throw all them in from all this, and the only one which matters, he's saying,
Well,
is
the
Judah.
brethren specifically, because again, the brethren are the root of the Israelites. That's the team. That's team Jews.
So okay, now that you mentioned this, right, I think about Esau and Jacob, right? So they both were blessed in different ways. Um, then, if that is true, if all the brethren, then shouldn't this author should have said, and Isaac was the father of Jacob and Esau.
No, so I'm saying those people are not part of the team. Esau is not team Jews. Ishmael is not team Jews. That's why they're excluded.
Okay, so who's a Jew? A Jew is like under the descendants of
Let's
Abraham,
take a let's
Jews.
take a step back and listen. It's a good question. That's why matriarch versus patriarch question is very important to try to understand. But putting aside who's a Jew, the first century writer of this text wanted to both be inclusionary and exclusionary to people who are not part of the team.
The scandal, the dignity of difference.
Yeah, it's good to kick some people out of the team. So no one in the first century, in their right mind, would view Esav or Ishmael their teams as part of the Jewish people. But the brethren, even if you count the 10 tribes that are lost, there's still Levites floating around Israel. There's still Shimonites. Again, I don't have to identify as that, but there's still people who understand that they may not be from the tribe of Judah, who are still identifying. And this text, they want to make sure applies to that person as well.
I have two questions on this topic. One is Rahab. So when he says, right, Boaz, again, Salmon, the father of Boaz by Rahab, is this Rahab in Joshua's time when they tried to move to Canaan and this person led them in? So it's not that, this is somebody else, right? There's some other Rahab, but this person has the same name. Fine. And then Ruth, right? Now Ruth is not a Jew, right? She like my so
Well, it depends how you look at it. And at the end of the day, it's a big argument what the point of the book of Ruth is. But how do these ignoble roots come to pop out a king? But she's definitely viewed as part of the famous line. So
okay. So she's viewed as part of the line, but the point is, Ruth is not a Jew to begin with. She's from the country of Moab, right? So she's not a Jew to begin with. She marries into a Jewish family, and that's how. And then they kind of draw the line through her. So So, okay, if Esau and all the others aren't Team Jews, Ruth to begin with is not Team Jew either.
No. So
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 isn't she like a Gentile being
there's
grafted in?
Team Goy and there's Team Jew, right? So Team Goy, Team non-Jew, those people are not part of the team. But Ruth, obviously through the Bible, is part of the team. The whole point of chapter 4 of the genealogy means that she's part of that team. That's why that genealogy in the book end of the book of Ruth is provided.
Okay, so back to the topic. Is it patriarchal or matriarchal? Does the genealogy pass by the patriarch? Like, is
Well,
it
it's very
like
clear that the text, again, it doesn't matter what the reality is. It matters that the kingship clear is meant to be viewed from father to son. That's what we're supposed to see here. That's why Tamar and Ruth are only mentioned as side points, where Judah and Oded and the others are much more important.
I see.
Okay, Isaac, on that note, I love the shirt. That's number one.
Thank you.
Good looking shirt. I love how your background kind of looks like it's matching my background accidentally.
Thank you. Thank you. I had
Yeah,
a great day. I want to say thank you. Because of you, I've become a better Christian. So I can't thank. I went to church. So thank you, God, for.
you're really identifying one of my goals in life, making Isaac a better Christian.
Amen. Amen. Amen.